Well, we're so glad to have so many of you with us this morning. And I think this is a great way to start a Friday. And so we are going to get started with Dr. John Ernst. John, why don't you take it away and help us start off to a good Friday for our Higher Ed Forum.
Well, thank you. I am trying to, okay, here we go. So the title of my presentation is Keep Calm and Meditate On. And it seems to me that we're in a very interesting time. And the co-title of my presentation is Meditation, Mindfulness in the Time of COVID. And it seems like we're kind of entering a phase where we're hopeful about opening up again and experiencing life outside of our offices and life outside of Zoom. And this sense of being closed down has been really pervasive. And we've had schools closed down and workplaces closed down and restaurants closed down. And we have these dreams, I think, of opening up again to life in some way. It was interesting though, too, yesterday, I went to, I'm fully vaccinated myself, and I went to a store to pick up some paper so I could print. And there were a group of people who were entering, and they were all looking at their cell phones. They were just a small group, 4 people, and they're all walking into the store looking at their cell phones. And I think, wow, we've really gotten closed off, so that how important screens have become, Zoom meetings and so on, during this period of time. And the idea of kind of detaching from that for a period of time, I thought would be useful, and going deeper and deeper into ourselves. I'm assuming that you've at least heard of meditation. Some of you might have been to one of the presentations I gave. It's been a few years now, but on mindfulness, and I talked about the research. I'm thinking of this as being a more kind of hands-on or minds-on experience, and so I'm going to talk about mindfulness generally, and then introduce some specific forms of meditation, mindfulness practices, and have you do this yourselves. And I thought we'd start off actually by just sitting for 2 minutes. And the instructions here will be simple. You're all at your space, wherever that might be. And if you could, if you're not already, just sit down, become comfortable, and close your eyes if that feels okay. You can keep them open, but if you do keep them open, try to keep the focus kind of general, so you're not honing in on anything, just kind of taking in everything. But closing your eyes might be easier. And just for the next 2 minutes, precisely, follow your breath. Just watch your breath as you breathe in and breathe out. And if you find that your mind has wandered, just bring your mind back to the breath, your focus back to the breath. So just sitting comfortably for 2 minutes, and we'll begin now. So I didn't give you a lot in the way of instruction there, and I'm just curious, particularly for those of you who haven't had any experience meditating, what happened? How did this go? And there's a blank screen now. So any kind of reactions to what just happened? What happened in your mind? What happened in your body?
You can place that in the chat room.
So how do we do that, Julie?
They'll
Or I
just
can
be
have
able,
to
yep,
hold off, I suppose.
they can just write that in the chat. It's down there at the bottom, and you
Okay.
can just put in your reflections and thoughts.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. It's not letting me type. Aware of my breathing. Oh, good. Lori. It is difficult to just sit and unplug. Oftentimes with meditation retreats or group meetings, it'll begin with just a moment of silence. And it's very difficult at first to turn the mind off. And in fact, that's not really the goal with mindfulness practices. And what people often discover, and I have this image up of what some practices call monkey mind, we become really aware of our thinking, which is going on all the time underneath the consciousness, and it becomes a distraction for us oftentimes, and we just become kind of obsessed with our thoughts and think that we're doing something wrong. Oftentimes too, people fall asleep because there's this moment of quiet in the middle of the day that we're not used to. And so that's a common response as well, particularly in the morning, I think, and or late at night when trying this. And so what I would like to think of when we move through mindfulness is certain postures that we can adopt, both in terms of our thinking and our physicality. And I want to focus more on the thinking, but oftentimes too, one of the things that comes up is a list of to-dos. I have to get this done, I have to get this done, which is perfectly fine, or a list of complaints about other people or ourselves. And so the idea that I want to kind of reinforce is that whatever comes in is fine. It becomes part of the practice. And that sounds pretty abstract right now. And so a bit later, I'm going to walk you through some very specific practices with some more specific guidance so that you can get a sense of this. And so it's really,
With me, but if you wanted to join the session, you're more than welcome. It's whatever you're interested in.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing something. So a couple of cartoons that both feature dogs and have something to say about meditation. And one of them is this: the key to learning mindfulness is learning to sit. And so just being quiet with yourself. The key to meditation, oops, how do I go back? Just to stay. So my desk is probably a little bit more messy than it ought to be. I want to make it clear, however, that mindfulness practices don't just involve sitting still. In fact, for some people, that can be really difficult. And so this is a list that was devised by the group called Contemplative Mind in Education out of Massachusetts. And what they try to do is integrate mindfulness practices into the curriculum in various ways. And this is something that I did with oral communication, which is a real high level anxiety class. You have to give speeches in front of other students. Oh my God, what could be worse, right? And so I incorporated mindfulness practices in my class as a way to kind of settle down. But as you can see, this tree, it has more than simply sitting. There are practices that involve stillness. So on the bottom left, you can see meditation, centering, silence. This is an age when we're almost never silent, right? We're bombarded by noises from all sides. But we also have creative, going up the tree, a couple of branches, creative forms of meditation that involve singing. There's actually a form of yoga, laughing yoga, that involves just that, laughing, journaling, volunteer work, moving up to the activist branch, volunteering, doing vigils, bearing witness, working for hospice or helping out somewhere at a food bank. Relational movement. Later today, one of the forms of meditation I'd like to practice with you is a brief walking meditation, which can be really handy because sometimes we find that we can't sit and we are walking, and we can use that movement as a form of meditation. So you might want to scope out where you are right now and just find a walking path. And by walking path, I mean maybe 6 feet will work. It doesn't really matter how long it is, but I'll be asking you to walk back and forth from that space. So there are a number of contemplative practices that you can engage in that don't necessarily involving sitting and staying, even though that is foundational to meditation oftentimes. Again, just showing different types of meditation. There are visualizations. There are sound healing meditations. For example, listening to gongs, guided meditations. And guided meditations might be a good way for people to begin. If you don't have any practice, if you don't have a regular practice, it's not a bad idea to find guided meditations. And if you want to know some good places to go, I'd be happy to share them with you. Yoga, movement meditation, and so on. But I also would suggest that you don't really need guided meditations either. In fact, what you need is simply yourself in some quiet space to meditate. And I think the most enlightening, the most kind of fruitful work gets done without being guided, even though I'm going to be doing some guiding today. But once you get past that guided meditation, to kind of work it on your own. So the operating definition that I'm going to be using, I have stolen from Jon Kabat-Zinn. And Jon Kabat-Zinn, for those of you who don't know, and even for those of you who do know, is really important for mindfulness practices in the United States. He was probably the most fundamental person to kind of bring these Eastern ideas to the United States in a kind of medicalized way. And he was working out of a hospital in Boston, the hospital affiliated with University of Massachusetts. And he was taught in mindfulness practices, and he really wanted to bring it to people who were in dire need. And so he asked the administration if he could work with people who were in the process of dying or who were in chronic pain. So people who were really in kind of a desperate situation. The book that came from this kind of suggests that, Full Catastrophe Living. And so he wanted to work with these people and teach them mindfulness and see what would happen after 8 weeks. And so he developed a pretty rigorous program and had them meditate for 45 minutes a day, had them do yoga for 45 minutes a day. Actually, the meditation was twice a day. And try that for 8 weeks. Have them fill out a self-evaluation at the beginning and at the end of the process. And what he discovered was that, without exception, those who participated in this experiment found that their situation, of course, hadn't changed. They were still in chronic pain. They were still moving towards death, but they were able to be more accepting. And so part of this is being accepting. So his definition is mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose, right now, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And that's, I think, for most of us in the West, the trick, non-judgmentally, because we tend to be very judgmental about ourselves, probably more than anybody else. I'll just kind of, go over the benefits of meditation quickly. A lot of the literature suggests quite strongly, in fact, that a number of things happen if you practice meditation on a daily basis. Your stress level will go down. You'll be able to regulate a bit more with your own impulses. You'll be able to feel more in the way of compassion and just being able to be more embodied in your own life. And again, without that kind of nagging judgmental component. So the stress is often why people go into meditation. There's a stress component, and meditation can in fact reduce stress. And they've done work with fMRIs. There was that wonderful talk yesterday about watching kids as they think, and they have done the same with meditators, watching them as they think. And so areas of the brain that ignite tend to be related less to fight, flight, and flight syndrome than to relaxation and kind of an oceanic state and so on. So the effects can be actually pretty quick, but it's not a quick fix. It's something that one engages with over a period of time. So I want to kind of jump into the how-tos a little bit and talk about postures, as I suggested, both physical and emotional, mental. And so when we're talking about posture, I'm talking first about sitting, and some schools of mindfulness spend an awful lot of time with this, and I'm not going to spend much at all. All I want to suggest is that you want to be comfortable and you want to be in a position where you're able to breathe freely. And so the image that you see on the screen now is a very common image of a meditation while sitting on a chair. You can sit on the floor, you can sit on a mat, and so on. But relatively erect, the idea of being dignified and allowing yourself space to breathe. Don't constrict your diaphragm. Laying on your back is perfectly fine. I spent the first several years of my meditative life laying in bed when I meditated. And the problem is, if you consider this a problem, it's easier to fall asleep. And so I was at a stage in my life, I'm afraid, well, I'm still in that stage, I guess. I don't have an easy time napping, but I didn't easily nap, although occasionally I would find myself falling asleep. And if you do, if this position is more comfortable for you physically, I would say go for this. And if you fall asleep, well, you probably need some more in your life. So that's all I'm going to say about physical posture. And when we get into the practice, we'll kind of briefly reintroduce that. I want to talk more about the kind of psychological and mental postures. And so this quote from Plato suggests attitude. And one approach to mindfulness is to try to be curious about what you're going to discover. So going into the practice, maybe thinking of it like an experiment that you're going to engage in. What am I going to find in doing this practice? Which on the surface of it seems very wacky, maybe. I'm going to follow my breath, which is one form of meditation that we're going to experiment with momentarily. It might seem wacky, but what am I going to discover in doing this? Just being curious about that. So taking an attitude perhaps of curiosity, and perhaps also setting an intention at the beginning of your practice. And setting intention is something you can do any time of day. And the idea here is that we're trying to move toward a sense of who it is we want to become. Shana Shapiro, who used to teach at Stanford, now is kind of teaching meditation to various groups all throughout the world, actually. She's really quite interesting. But she says, what you practice, you become. And so a lot of times, if I'll just use myself as an example, I'll practice things that I don't especially want to become. So somebody cuts in front of me and I'll get angry. And you can carry that anger with you. I can carry that anger with me as long as I keep refreshing it. And so by practicing anger, we become angry people. And so the likelihood is that we don't want to become angry people. At least, yeah, I used to have visions of me running after the paper boy. Come back here, you, because I was an angry person. And so just possibly taking some simple intentions to maybe thank somebody who helped us out today, small thing, and somebody makes a small gesture, a stranger perhaps, or maybe not a stranger, somebody in your everyday life, make some gesture in helping you. Just thank them. Thank them for something they've done in the past. To try to laugh. Today, I intend to laugh once. Today, I intend to not get angry. That's a tough one. Tend to notice something beautiful in nature. Today might be an easy day for that. Flowers are blooming, apple blossoms are up, and so on. So, but just setting intentions that kind of move along the direction of who you would like to become. Open-mindedness. This one gets to be a little bit difficult, possibly. We've learned more and more that we tend to reinforce our belief systems, and the media helps us to do that, but trying to keep as much of an open mind as possible, including about the practice. Meditation is supposed to make me calm and I'm all agitated. Well, what's going on now with that? So exploring as opposed to kind of pushing away, but being open-minded to whatever comes up in the course of meditation. I will insert a brief caveat here. There are times, especially for people who engage in longer meditation sessions, where things might come up that you're really not ready to handle. And if that some event from the past, let's say, or something traumatic that might be going on now even that you've pushed off. And if that happens, then there's no sense in confronting it, right? Just let it go, not being open to something that's going to be harmful. So being kind of aware of the need to self-care throughout all of this. Just a quick little open-mindedness quote. Open-minded people do not impose their beliefs on others. They accept all of life's perspectives and realities, doing their own thing in peace without judging anyone. And I would say, including themselves, which is, again, probably the toughest aspect of it. So open-mindedness and acceptance are relatively, I would say, synonymous. I like Pema Chodron, particularly the second half of this quote here, who is a Buddhist teacher from the US. It's about befriending who we are already. It's about befriending who we are already. And I'm teaching a class in advertising right now, and advertising is often about what's wrong with you, what you have to fix, and why you need this particular product to help you fix it. And so this is kind of counter to a lot of what our culture is telling us, befriending who we are already. Letting it go. This is a huge component of mindfulness practices. During the course of sitting, the likelihood is that you're going to have thoughts enter. This becomes a major part of the process, and it's something to kind of welcome, but recognizing it and letting it go. So a good part of mindfulness thinking in general is that most of our problems in life come from clinging to things which are ephemeral, and they're going to leave us, trying to hold on to this moment, this ice cream, this whatever it might be, or pushing away. I don't want it, don't want it, don't want it. And so it's more like, again, taking an accepting attitude. It's kind of a support for that, letting it go as well. It's going to come, it's going to go, and you can help it just by letting it go, detaching. This is a sign from British subways about minding the gap. And the idea is that if you don't, you're going to fall between the trains as you try to enter it. And it's not a pretty sight. But mindfulness schools have taken up the idea of minding the gap between our various thoughts. There tends to be a gap between a thought and another thought, or an emotion and another emotion, being aware of that gap. Because what can happen is that if we don't mind the gap, we can find ourselves on this train of thought, somewhere where we didn't intend to be. In driving, for example, or walking to the refrigerator and wondering, well, how did I get here? The idea that we can get carried away by our thoughts, maybe not literally, but figuratively. So minding the gap, and this all in some way boils down to the idea that what you practice, you become. And so to perhaps make it a point to try to practice being aware of those gaps, and to approach it with kindness, let's say. Approach the sensations of life with kindness toward yourself and towards other people, giving yourself, giving others the benefit of the doubt. And so this idea of what you practice, you become, is sort of dependent upon this little schema here. And this is one that I'm trying to remember, Skip Downing came up with this, who does some work with education. But he talks about how when we are given a stimulus, regardless of what it might be, a car horn honks, the sun catches our eye, somebody cuts out in front of us on the street, anything. We can react, which is simply to kind of go into default mode, where we are the center of the universe and we're more likely to get upset and so forth, or we can respond. So the response is what takes more work. This is sort of why we meditate, so that we're able not to simply react, which is more mechanical, almost more machine-like. It's the default mode, but to respond, to work on that which helps us become who we want to become. And so we have this moment between, and this is a quote from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he became a philosopher. And he talked about the moment between stimulus and response, that there is a space. So that stimulus can be entirely internal. It can be a thought. And we can respond to that thought by encouraging it or trying to push it away, clinging or aversion, or we can work with it. We can be with it. And this is where we're moving with mindfulness practices. So between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is the ability to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So those are high aspirations indeed, but the idea that we work with what we're given, basically. And the last will be simply breathe, which is something that we do whether or not we're aware of it. And so I want to move on to actually introducing you to 3 practices. And the 3 practices are these. We've already done one, but I want to kind of delve a little more deeply. A body scan, simple breath awareness meditation, and then some mindful walking. And so if you would grab a position similar to those that we saw earlier, sitting down, laying down, whatever you're comfortable with, just find your space. I'm going to lead you through a meditation. So just getting comfortable in your space. If it feels okay, just go ahead and close your eyes. just do a quick internal inventory. How are you feeling right now? Physically, emotionally, mentally. Just notice. And feel your body sink into the space that you're currently in. And begin by taking 3 deep breaths. So breathing from the stomach, from the diaphragm out, kind of like a baby, big breath. So deep breath in for a count of 5, say, and hold it at the top for maybe a moment or 2, and just let it out. Maybe sighing as you do, and letting the diaphragm push out as much air as feels comfortable, allowing your own breath to spring back. Deep breath in again, count of 5, hold it for a moment at the top. Letting it out, one more on your own. And allow your breath to return to its natural rhythm. And let's begin by noticing our forehead. So just notice any sensations that you feel in your forehead, possibly from the inside out, noticing the muscles that may be contracted, and just softening up your forehead so that you're detensing those muscles, moving down to your eyes, softening your eyes. Notice the complexity of musculature and weight, all that's going on with the eyes, the pressure of the eyelids on the eyeballs. I mean, there's really a lot going on here. And so just relaxing the muscles around the eyes, becoming aware of the weight of the eyes. And moving down to your mouth. Again, another spot that tends to hold a lot of tension. There tend to be a lot of sensations here. So notice how your teeth are set, how your lips are set. And if you notice, for example, that you're clenching your teeth, maybe just put some space between them. Wiggle your jaw, slightly lower jaw back and forth. Placing the tongue at the top of your mouth, the roof of your mouth. And just relaxing any tension that you find in your jaw, in your mouth. And around your mouth, noticing to your cheeks. As we move down to our neck, noticing first the back of our neck, the front of our neck, inside our neck. You might even be able to catch the breath as it moves in and out through your neck. Just relaxing any tension you might find, particularly in the back of your neck, at the point where your neck meets your skull, and it's moving down slowly to your shoulders, and noticing any tension that you might feel there. And with your next out breath, just letting any tension that you feel there dissolve. Let it go. Moving down your upper arms. You might notice the feeling of whatever it is you're wearing on your arms. If you're wearing short sleeves, you might notice the air on the outsides of your arms. Just noticing whatever sensations are there. Accepting and moving to your elbows, inside and out, to your lower arms, to our wrists, and down to those complex machines, our hands, noticing the palms of your hands, any sensations that you might feel there. Coolness, warmth, wetness, dryness. Just noticing the outsides of your hands, the backs of your hands. And noticing in turn our fingers, beginning with our thumbs, moving from the thumbs out, moving from the inside out, just noticing any tension, any sensations. Not trying to fix anything, just trying to notice and relax. Forefinger, middle finger, ring finger, small finger. We can spend a lot of time just exploring our hands, but moving back up our arms to our neck, down our back. I'm going to move a little more quickly, but our chest, our heart center, perhaps becoming aware of your heart beating, which has been doing all our lives. Some people will meditate with their hands on their hearts, often considered the emotional core of our being, our heart. Just noticing and perhaps feeling a sense of gratitude to our heart, which day after day pumps our blood. Softening your stomach area and gently moving down your spine, upper back, middle back, lower back. Maybe spending a little time with your lower back and noticing any tenseness, being kind to your lower back, noticing the weight, if you're sitting, of your butt on the chair, if you're laying down on the floor, your whole pelvic region, noticing your upper legs, your knees, both inside and out, the calves of your legs, your lower legs, ankles, heels, soles of your feet, tops of your feet, and like our fingers working with our toes, big toe, second toe, third toe. Some of the sensation here might be a bit vague, that's fine. Fourth toe, fifth toe. And just for a few moments, imagining as though you can breathe from the top of your head. So you're breathing, and as you breathe in, you are revisiting those spots that we've already visited, our foreheads, our eyes, our mouths. And imagine as though, as we breathe, we are kind of flushing any residual tension out, down through our arms and fingertips, and down through our spine and down our legs and out through our toes, just kind of being in a state of relaxation, physical relaxation. So you could spend a good bit of time with the body scan meditation, and the Yoga Nidra is often a body scan meditation that you can do that will help you to sleep at night. Yoga, Nidra. But since we're in this position now, I'd like to just transition over into watching our breath for a few moments. And so wherever it is that you notice your breath, most obviously, and it doesn't matter, there's no best spot, tip of your nose, upper chest, throat, diaphragm. Just see if you can watch your breath as it naturally breathes itself. No need to control. No problem if you find yourself wanting to control. But with an attitude of acceptance, just see if you can follow your breath for one entire turn, from the moment you begin to inhale until you make the turn to exhalation and then back again. And if your mind wanders off, without judgment, kindly just bring your attention back to your mind, to your breath. No recriminations, you're not doing it wrong. This is the moment that Viktor Frankl was talking about. The moment we catch ourselves thinking is that moment of stimulus where we can choose, and in our choice lies our freedom. So just choosing to accept and let go. So for the next minute, I'll be silent. And so with your next in-breath, take a more consciously deep breath in. Just notice the impact that has on your being, your energy level. And with your next in-breath, even more deeply still, maybe sighing out, and begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. And when you feel comfortable, go ahead and open your eyes. I hope you're okay. I'm going to ask, though, that we at least become introduced to the idea of walking practice. And so earlier I asked you to scout out a position, pathway that you can take. And so if you would stand at this point, and maybe mindfully stand with an awareness of your musculature moving you upward, just standing and getting a sense of balance, just kind of rocking gently back and forth, side to side, and kind of finding your balance, your center. And the idea here is simply to walk. And at this point, you can walk as slowly as you'd like. We'll just do 2 rounds, walking to the space that you've set out as your endpoint, turning, stopping, taking a breath, and walking back. And while you're walking, become aware of the complexities of this act. So feel the pressure of the heel as it hits the floor, and you can actually begin walking right now. And it doesn't matter where you keep your hands. Some people will keep them in front of themselves or behind them, their backs. But just notice the weight of the foot as it engages at its various points, heel, ball, toes, and it leaves the ground, moves forward or back, reconnects. Just becoming aware of the very complex series of actions that are involved with this simple act of walking. How marvelous it is. And when you've reached the point that you've set out, there's a stopping point, to slowly turn and take a breath and return to the spot that you've begun from. And one more time. And don't let my pace of speaking interrupt your pace of walking. And once you've reached that point, returning again to your starting point, I'd just like to say that the walking meditation has been for me incredibly valuable. I used to be a panicky teacher, and I would use walking meditation to take me to class every day. And you don't have to walk very slowly to do this. You could walk at your normal rate, but just becoming aware of the fact that you're walking and focusing on that begins to open up the sort of marvels of that process. And I'll just put it in my own case, my small concerns diminish in light of this kind of wonderful act of walking as the world opens up, and your own kind of smallness. This is something I kind of alluded to at the beginning, how we've narrowed our focus down. We're engaged in our cell phones as we walk. Opens up instead. We open up to what is. This one, I'm trying to remember the words of the poet Mary Oliver, this one precious life we have. So I'm going to leave it at that and open the floor to any questions you might have, any comments you might have. And thank you all for showing up. I hope the rest of your conference experience is wonderful. But yes, if anybody has any questions, I would be more than happy to respond, or any comments for that matter.
So you can place your questions in the chat, or if you wanted to raise your hand using the reactions, I can scroll and unmute if you have any questions for Dr. Ernst. I think this was a wonderful way to start a Friday for our sessions. Makes you focused and eager to learn more.
How do you start working it in? That's a really good question. Thank you, Stacy. I would say this: start small, and because you don't want to make it a chore. I forgot to meditate. Instead, if we could make it something we look forward to. So some classical tips have been: do it at the same time every day. So when I started meditating, I do it after work. Pick a time that's reasonable that you can work with. And so I picked 15 minutes when I started, but 10 is fine, 2 is fine, whatever you can get in, and just see what happens. See if it doesn't open up more time for you, or maybe you want to stay with whatever period of time you began with, 2 minutes. There's actually a book called the Two-Minute Meditator. And so same time, so that it becomes a habit. It takes a while to become a habit. And the duration, just try to have a timer perhaps. That's really all you need. It could be on your watch or whatnot. I used to have a kitchen timer that you turn and it would ding. But and even just a clock, you can open your eyes, look at the clock, and go back. Your mindfulness practice. So I hope that answered your question. You can find support too, I'll say, online. And I'm seeing the 10% Happier app and Headspace, which are both good ways to get started. There's also, well, there are a whole bunch of apps. I won't get into that, but started the journey 5 weeks ago and it's been transforming. Yeah. I'd be interested, Jean, if you'd be willing to share a little bit more about the transforming, what kind of transformations you experienced.
There we go. Hi, John. Yeah, thank you. So I actually started taking a class on mindfulness because I recognized it was something that I really needed in my life, especially with everything that's been going on this past year. But in terms of transforming, I've just recognized that I've been happier as a whole. Although there's a lot of chaos in life, I found ways to deal with stress in a very different way.
Good.
And just issues that arise on a daily basis. And so the breathing techniques have been helpful. I sleep better, which is crazy because I used to, I don't know, some other people might have issues too, but at night before work the next day and things going on, just chaos in my mind, right? And so it's calmed me tremendously. And I found that my sleep has been much better. So it's been great. I encourage people to do it. It's not easy all the time, but just a few minutes a day to just make time and space for it. All the difference in the world.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it can seem difficult. You're right. I'm sorry. For me, the kind of tipping point was the idea of being curious, like what's coming up. One of my students once described it as being like watching a flume ride at an amusement park, logs coming down. And she would talk about it in terms of thoughts coming in and how they would just like come and go. And so sometimes what we get really worked up about, she said, weren't didn't seem that important. Whoop, there it goes. Here it comes again, but there it went. And so.
Well, it looks like we've got just a minute left in our session. So if we have any final thoughts, and then we will all be taken back into the main room to begin our day. So John, any final thoughts?
No, I'm just happy to have been here. I usually don't meditate this early unless I'm on a retreat. And so it's just a nice way to begin the day. And I thank you all for being here. I will say that to meditate together, even if it's virtually, can really be a reinforcing experience. So that might be something else you might look for, to meditate with others. So thank you all.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us for this pre-session. And it'll just be just a minute and we will be taken into the full meeting. So again, thank you, Dr. Ernst, for starting us off today. I much appreciate it.